I'm going to start this review as soon as I can talk uninterrupted. It's just the planes in the flight path are a massive pain living here. Not all the time, but enough. So this is a review of the new 1-inch 360 module for the Insta360 RS system. It's 1 inch because it has two 1-inch sensors. When I say 1 inch, it's that, the 1 inch. I have a whole video about what that means, but it is a much bigger sensor than we've had in any of the previous Insta360 consumer cameras. And it does make a huge difference with the image. And that's what this review is about. It's about looking at the image, because it's always been the biggest issue with the Insta360 products is the image always lets it down. And especially with a 360 camera where you do have to do a lot of zooming in and cropping of the image. And therefore it needs to be a high quality image to start with. Let me start by saying this is by far the best video image from a 360 consumer camera that I've ever seen. It's definitely a worthy upgrade for anyone who has any of the other 360 consumer cameras if video image quality is the most important thing for you. There are some negatives as well as the positives, and one of the negatives for me is a big one, the audio that the camera records. I'll go into that in detail later on in the review. Every now and then you're going to see a graphic come up saying Topaz Enhanced. This is where I have improved the image quality after running the clip through Topaz Labs Video Enhance AI, a piece of software I've talked about a lot that can do wonders for all sorts of footage, and especially lower resolution video and shots with lots of compression artifacts. I've also used Film Convert Nitrate to grade and improve some of the shots. Again, you will get a graphic to let you know when I have. Don't worry, I will be showing loads of straight out of camera shots, but by showing you how these pieces of software can make the footage look as good as it can is important. You can get free trials of them at these addresses. The Nitrate link also gives you 10% off. If you want to see the best examples of using this camera creatively that I've seen, then check out Brandon Lee's video, which is linked in the description. You won't see anything like that from me in this video. My examples are much more mundane, but what I do have are a lot more cats than Brandon has in his video. This is the Insta360 One X2, and these are the sort of shots that I use 360 cameras for. I'm able to get really interesting shots like this and be able to film myself when out and about. The biggest downside is the image has always stood out like a sore thumb when you put it next to the rest of the footage. And that's why the 1-inch camera is important to me. If you're into drinking games, here is one for you. Every time I say the word sharpened or over sharpened, you can take a drink, but probably best not to really. I don't recommend it, but if you want to, you can. Well, I wouldn't recommend it. It wouldn't be an Insta360 review if my Fiat Barchetta wasn't involved, but it's great for doing these sort of drive and talks, and it's an interesting looking car. It's a nice looking car. It's appeared in most of my Insta360 reviews. I've had it, well, since '96, I believe. One very important thing to remember when mounting a camera to a car is stabilization, whether it should be on or off. The thing is, if the car is in frame, like now, then, unless the car's really bumpy, which my Fiat is a bit bumpy, then you want to have stabilization turned off. You want to have the car to be nice and static in frame, and you can have the background bouncing around, because if you have stabilization turned on when it's a car in frame, then the car bounces around and the horizon stays the same, which basically looks weird. But if you don't have the vehicle in shot, like if I point towards the front, then you want your stabilization on. And the great thing about Insta360 cameras is you can do this in post. You can decide whether flow state, which is their stabilization, should be turned on or it should be off. With the action cameras and like the Go 2, you can actually get it to have built-in stabilization, so you don't have to go through any post steps using the app to apply it or not apply it. It's not as good, and I don't recommend it. I always recommend just leaving it as basic recording and make that decision in post. You're going to get much better results, and if you do decide to have a lock-off shot like now without any stabilization on, then it definitely looks a lot better. The new 1-inch 360 module I think has a very different purpose than both the standard 360 one and the 1X2. It seems to be very much normal speed focused. The 6K mode records in up to 30p, and the 4K is strangely only up to 25p, not even 30p. The only slow motion is only at 3K and it's just 50p. The other two cameras have 4K at 50p and 3K at 100p. Whilst you can use it for action sports, the lack of slow motion is definitely a negative for that. It's also not as robust because it's not an all-in-one unit like the 1X2, and it isn't in a solid bracket like the standard 360 camera for the R and the RS system. The form factor looks very similar to the 1X, 1X2, just a lot chunkier. Take off the new 360 and then this comes out, and here is the new RS brain and the high capacity battery. So this is where the SD card goes in. It's a bit awkward to get out, or you have to take it apart to get it out, which is not ideal, so just put a decent size one in there, put those together, slide it into the vertical grip which comes with it, and attach the camera clips in on, and there we go. The camera's called splash proof. It's not waterproof, it's not water resistant, so just be careful when you're outside in the rain like this, and it is underneath the roof, but it is going to get some splashes on it, which is absolutely fine, but it's nowhere near as water resistant as the standard module when it's in the housing. But there may well be a proper waterproof housing that will come out at some point. I'm pretty certain there will be. So this would have been quite nice, a bit of slow motion rain, but not enough to really have any impact anyway. I'm going to try. I think it'll be very useful if I just give you a brief explainer of 360 cameras and how I use them, how they're used for reframing rather than using a 360 recorded video in a headset. Because it's the reframing which is the really fun and exciting use of them, rather than just have it in a headset. Because I've got two cameras mounted right now, one on the bonnet of the car, and that is the new 1-inch module. It's using a magnetic mount, the 3-footed monster, which is very good, on a selfie stick. And on the back of the car, again on a 3-footed monster, the selfie stick, is the standard 1-inch module for the Insta360 R and RS. And that has much smaller sensors with 1/2.3 inches, the same as the 1X2. What we have on this 1-inch is two 6.52mm full frame equivalent lenses, and they record onto 1-inch sensors. So there's two of them, so there's two sensors, and that gives us this fisheye recording. In the higher resolution recordings, you get two separate files, and those are each camera. You bring them into the software. I recommend using the desktop app, the studio app. You can use your phone, it's absolutely fine, but you get a lot more control, fine control with the studio app. And what it does, it takes those two circular images, those two recordings, and it combines them, stitches them together to create a 2x1 equirectangular image. Now this is what you would put in your headset, and this is 6K on this camera here. On the old one it's 5.7K, a little bit less. This is where the fun comes in, where we start reframing and changing what we see, because you have recorded 360 degrees. Everything around the camera is recorded, so you can choose what you want to see. Whilst the recording is 6K, you're not going to maintain that once you start cropping in. The more you zoom in, crop in, of course, the lower the resolution will be. And this is where we've always had the issue, because you need to have a certain quality of image to be able to crop in to the amounts that we need to do sometimes to get the shots that we want from these 360 cameras. With my cameras like the Sony a7S III and those sort of cameras, you can crop into the image quite a lot as long as you have your sharpness turned down. The problem we have with the small sensor cameras is they tend to always be way over sharpened. Some people like that look, I don't. It's very unnatural. You see, sharpness is not detail. We want to see the amount of detail in the image, but we don't want these harsh edges. But one of the main reasons that it has this over sharpening is because these small sensors need noise reduction frequently, and noise reduction softens the image, and so therefore they add sharpening, which looks horrible. You don't need to add that much at all. It's just really just over process. So it's a lot of the former about people liking that look, and also the latter about the noise reduction. Because if you look at the GoPro cameras, they have the ability to have a sharpness that's a low, and some people say that looks too soft. Well, all you're doing is you're turning off in-camera sharpening. Just do it in post. It's way better in post because you have full control. When you start cropping in to an over-sharpened image, it looks absolutely awful, and this is the problem that we've always had. So we need our sharpness to be turned right down. I've been complaining to DJI for years about that over-sharpened image, and I've recently been complaining to Autel about the over-sharpened image on Nano Plus, and I've complained to Insta360 a lot about that over-sharpened image. And thankfully in the R and the RS cameras, they have got the ability to adjust the sharpness from very high to medium to low, and the difference it makes is huge. To clearly show you the difference between over-sharpened and almost no sharpening, I did some tests in my Catio, mainly with the 1-inch, but I had the 1X2, the standard module, and the Pro 2 to keep it company. The 1X2 has no sharpness control, it's very over-sharpened, so when you crop in, it does not look very good at all. I've used film convert nitrate to soften the image and add film grain, and more recently Topaz to try and make them look better. It is hard though, the image is pretty damaged because of that over sharpening. I don't know why they haven't added sharpness control in this camera, because they've added it to the 1R system a while back. Pretty much all the shots that you can see in this video using that standard 360 module, I used the low sharpening mode, which to be honest with you was a little bit too mushy. I would probably say medium is the best for it. But definitely use low when you are using the non-360 cameras. Oi, you can have that one. Sevi. By default, the R and the RS, no matter which camera is attached to it, will be on very high sharpness, which, as you can see here, is not good. And this is just a 4K boost action camera, not even the 360. Sevi. This is the 1-inch 360 module with very high sharpness. Pretty hideous, isn't it? Especially with me as the subject. You can see all the nasty artifacts caused by this over sharpening. The sensors of this camera are 4 times bigger than the 1/2.3 inch of the other 360 consumer cameras, but you're losing the benefit of them unless you change this setting. In low, it's like a different camera. This is the setting you want to be shooting in. You could use medium sharpness like Insta360 recommend, but I personally still find it too much. This is all in-camera sharpness that's being added, so just shoot it in low and add sharpness in post. How much? Well, the more you crop in, the more you might need to add. It all depends on taste. You can only change the sharpness in the menu under general and settings sharpness. You can't do it in the app, and we have this with lots of different things, in that you can only change certain aspects in the camera and certain things in the app, And you can't have the app open if you want to access settings in the camera. So you just need to just close your phone off and then it lets you access them. A bit strange. I'd like to have access to all the settings of the camera in the app, please. One of the biggest improvements that the 1-inch 360 has over the smaller sensor ones is how much less noise it has. Those small sensor cameras, they have a lot of noise, even at the lowest ISO. And what happens when you add sharpening to noise? Well, it looks even worse. This is one of the big reasons why the 1-inch 360 image looks so much better than the others. Because I have it out here is the £4,000 Insta360 Pro 2, which has 6 cameras and 6 1/2.3-inch sensors, recording up to 8K 60p. By not trying to squeeze everything onto 2 sensors, it can have lenses with a narrower field of view, which makes the image way superior optically. The downside is the workflow is hideous and it's expensive. Actually, there's no sharpness control here either, but because it's 8K and split across 6 recordings, the image still looks very nice. Another reason though is how it records. It is only 8-bit H.264, but each of the 6 separate clips that it records has a bitrate of around 120 megabits per second for 8K 60p. So if you add them all together, that's 720 megabits a second. With the consumer cameras, it's a bit all over the place and somewhat confusing. The bitrate is really important as the resolution really, and none of these bitrates are really high enough for the amount of cropping in that we need to do. The lack of H.265 recording for the 1-inch 360 is such a shame. I'm sure overheating is a big issue, but I hope they can solve it. You can just about get away with these figures on a normal flat image as long as you don't pixel peep. But when we crop in for these 360 videos, that's exactly what we're doing. So when you see all these compression artifacts, you've got 2 choices. Don't crop in so much, or use some software to help you. Basically Topaz. You've already seen how good a job it can do, especially at getting rid of these compression issues and recovering detail. It's also the best software I've used for working with over-sharpened footage, when I use the de-halo setting in the fine-tuning mode. It can only do so much though when it's really over-sharpened video, but it can help. When you take raw photos, you can really see what the cameras are capable of. Set it to 0 sharpening in Lightroom and you can see a much better dynamic range and of course way less compression. The only way you can get video using this though is by using the 2 different time-lapse modes. I would avoid using the pure shot mode, which is a bit like HDR, unless you're just using it for social media or on your phone, as it needs to use the JPEG, which is very over-sharpened. The photos on a 1-inch are of course way better than the smaller sensor cameras. Like the video, they have much less noise, even at the lowest ISO. I also compared the 1-inch photos to my Theta Z1, which also uses 1-inch sensors. Ricoh's Theta 360 was my first 360 camera, so I have a soft spot for them, but they have a long way to catch up with Insta360 in the video department. As you can see, it looks pretty awful. And to top it off, there is no stabilization, so it's only good for lock-offs. This is the GoPro Max, their 360 camera, 5.5K, something like that. This is the internal microphone, and this is in their flat profile, their Pro Tune with the flat colors and the sharpness at low. So you can see what it looks like. They haven't really done much with this camera. It's not had any new firmware for a long time and the software is very lacking, but you can still do all the manipulations that you do with Insta360 cameras within Premiere using the plugin, which is the same plugin that you use with the Insta360 files. Anyway, Harriet's over there. I'm going to get into the rain a bit. Oh, no. And she's gone. But Jimmy's here anyway. And so is Percy. You should absolutely only shoot with the standard color profile. The vivid is too vivid, and the log doesn't actually have that much more dynamic range, and only 8-bit, heavily compressed, not ideal. You also need to be very careful about your exposure, because you do not want to underexpose this log image. We're in log with our exposure at -0.5 EV, the sky's still blown out. and sharpness is at low. So I'm just redoing the log on the 1" because the stuff I did before was at 10 raw, everything blotchy. It was at -0.5. But you don't normally underexpose with log, but I was trying to hold some of the highlights, but no chance. So I'm at 1 now, +1 in log. 2 looks like sharpness at low. It's a shame, as I did that with a really nice one-off moment, and the footage really didn't come out well. You've already seen this little cat, and if you've been following my channel, you'll know who this is. And this was the first time I let her into the catio to explore. This is Sevi, also known as Severus, and she's from Eleni Beach in Skiathos in Greece. She was a key part of my film Sharpness and was heavily featured in my review of the DJI Mini 3 Pro.
Hello. Hi.
A month ago I adopted her finally, so she now lives with me and my other cats. She needed to come off that beach. She's at least 14 years old and she was visibly struggling. Now, I don't have to worry about her anymore. She's safe. And she's happy. As this is becoming a long video already and it's taken far too long to make, I'm not going to go very in depth about the manipulation and how you do all that with the various pieces of software, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview. It is way too complicated and really needs its own video, and if you'd like one, let me know in the comments below. All of them give you the ability to reframe the 360 video with tilt, pan, rotation, zoom and curvature controls, as well as fine-tune the stitching, turn on or off stabilization, although you cannot calibrate the stitching in the Premiere plugin. For this video I used a combination of the desktop app and in Premiere. The big advantage of both of these over the mobile one is the way it works with keyframes and curves. You can't even use keyframes if you turn stabilization off in the mobile app. Using curves on your keyframes makes any movement so much more natural looking. This is one of my very first shots using the 1". I mounted it onto the bonnet of my Mitsubishi Barbarian for my drive to pick up Severus, using of course the lovely 3-footed monster. It's really solid. In Premiere you get much more control over how your curves work in the keyframes, just like any keyframe in Premiere.
Whoa!
I was able to get the timing perfectly on the panning on this shot, from me to the train and onto the front view, with the perfect amount of easing in and out of each keyframe. When using the desktop app, exporting in 4K does give you the best quality, but only just if you have heavily cropped in. And the difference between using a decent bitrate H.265 and ProRes 422 on a really cropped in image is negligible. The only time I used the mobile app was when I was out and about, and for the shot lab section, which is very TikTok, but a lot of fun. And as you can see, I had far too much fun with the sky replacement mode, that's for sure. I think my favourite one was where I could replace the sky with clouds. Really useful in England. The other one I really liked was the shadow clone feature. So there were multiple me's. How useful would that be? Couple to go out shooting, one to edit, one to cuddle the cats. Actually, I need more than one to cuddle the cats. You could do this manually, not particularly easy, and you need to do it within Premiere. And to prove it, I gave it a try. I don't put my videos out on embargo day for various reasons I've talked about before, but one of the important ones is it's good to see what other people do, to see if I've missed anything, but also if there's anything that needs clarification. What do you think, Harriet? Did anything need clarification? Anything missed? Yeah? If you've watched my videos before, you know what's coming. Yes, time to mention the sponsor of this review, Skillshare, but nicely integrated within some creative stuff from this camera. It is an online learning platform which is geared mostly towards creativity, but there's loads of other stuff on there. Thousands of different courses, and I've done a fair few of them. The courses that I've done are very eclectic, everything from belly dancing to stuff which is more appropriate to what I do. But what I was looking for in particular was about time management, which is the worst thing for me. About making sure that I get things done and not get overly obsessed, like I always do, and I've mentioned many times in these videos before. I've been focusing on the productivity ones and time management I've tried before. I need to keep doing it. There's so many on here, but it's all about finding the time, isn't it, really?
Being productive is really just a matter of understanding the productivity equation and then figuring out which bits of it we need to optimize to apply to our own lives. Hi everyone, my name is Ali and I'm a doctor working full-time in the UK's National Health Service. On the side, I've got a YouTube channel, a weekly podcast, a weekly email newsletter, a blog, and 3 businesses that all generate varying degrees of passive income. And on top of that, I teach physiology to medical students at the University of Cambridge, and I dabble with guitar, piano, singing, close-up magic, and trying to maintain some semblance of a social life.
Well, that's ridiculous. I'll give it a try. You can give it a try too. There is a free trial for Skillshare at the link in the description below. I absolutely hate vlogging with a passion. Going out around people with a camera on the end of a selfie stick, talking to it. Nah, that's not me, not at all. But I am doing this for you guys to just talk about a couple of things, because this does have the potential to be a very good vlogging camera, because you have that enormous flexibility of filming everything, so you can be wide and tight, look around, which is good. Unless you're the sort of person who just wants the camera to be on you, then no. The biggest problem though is audio. You've already heard what the internal mic sounds like. It's not very good. There is an external mic solution. They make a USB-C adapter for a 3.5mm input, and it's a bracket, I think it's by Ulanzi, and it lets you put a mic on there. So I have my DJI mic, radio mic here. This is the microphone and the transmitter, and the receiver's on the camera. The thing is, it doesn't sound very good, does it? The recording. And this was very confusing to me. You compare it to the internal recording, which this does, and it's night and day difference. I've never used an external microphone with an Insta360 camera before, so this is the first time I did it. And it sounded like 16 kilohertz to me. But if you looked at the file, it said 48. But that's a wrapper. So I asked Insta360, and after a lot of back and forth and sending them clips, they did confirm to me that yes, indeed, it is converting and recording as 16 kilohertz. To be honest, I was a bit shocked, and even more shocked when I found out this isn't unique to this camera system. For all of their cameras with the USB adapters, it always records at 16 kilohertz. And the internal microphone is also recording at 16 kilohertz. That's basically what the video records audio as, which It's part of the reason why the internal mic sounds so bad. There's other reasons, but part of the reason. I told them how important it was to fix this. You can't have crappy audio on any of their cameras, really. There's no excuse for recording at 16 kHz, not in 2022. They have promised me that they're going to work really hard to make it 48 kHz. So keep an eye on the description of this video, because I will update it, and hopefully at some point I will have the magic word saying audio's fixed. It's now 48 kHz. If you don't know how the selfie stick disappears and how these 360 cameras work, then where have you been? I'm going to show you anyway. It's very simple. Basically, you have the two cameras, two sensors, and anything between those disappears. When you are filming handheld with something like this, you don't keep pointing the camera at something. You don't need to do that because it is 360. Apart from the fact there is the distance between the two lenses and what gets cancelled out, which can affect what you're filming and can cause some really weird things. So on this, they recommend 50 centimeters distance from it. I'm a bit more than that right now. If you get a bit too close in that dead zone between the lenses, then you see we have something which is a bit weird. So you just need to be careful. So it's like right now I have a lens pointing at me, which is natural, but round to the sides, then, you know, not so good. The normal 360 mod is a smaller distance, so he gets a little bit closer, not that much to be honest with you, and the one next to is definitely a smaller gap, so you can get closer and there's less chance of things being cancelled out. So just be very mindful of when you are using it, when you're positioning it, in case of something in that dead zone that you know, you actually need, like a person or something. But even when you're mounting it on a car, use the live stitched preview in the app so you can see where that dead zone is when you are mounting it in position, to make sure nothing key is removed. And if you're doing it handheld, you don't need to look at the app at all, as long as what's important isn't within 50 centimeters of that dead zone. Easy to remember, isn't it? Best way to hide a shadow of an invisible selfie stick, with your own shadow. So because of the poor audio, getting some ambient sound here is difficult. Rely on the microphone there, it's actually very good. So I have my wonderful Zoom H3 VR. I absolutely love this microphone. So I just need to hide it here somewhere and get some approximation of the sound that we have. So this can record for, you know, for VR use, and it can do 5.1 stereo and binaural stereo, which is what I tend to use. The difference in resolution between a standard camera and this one is negligible. 5.7K to 6K doesn't make a huge difference. The sensor size though, of course it does. Having a 4 times larger sensor will give you better low light performance. Same amount of pixels almost means they're going to be larger because of that larger sensor. And this means it's going to be better in low light. Doesn't mean it's going to be a low light 360 camera, just better in low light because those small sensor ones are terrible in low light. I am at 1600 ISO and a 50th of a second, and without question it's underexposed. If I went any higher, the noise reduction that's already there is going to get stronger and make the image much more mushy, basically. When you're moving around with flow states, you want to have a shutter speed really, I would say 100th of a second, ideally higher than that. It needs some decent edges to be able to stabilize things without having any nasty artifacts. But you also don't want your ISO to be too high. The key to getting good results at nighttime is manual exposure. Just avoid auto exposure because it is going to give you high ISOs, low shutter speed, and that's not going to work very well. If you're filming in places indoors where the previous cameras would struggle, not quite enough light, you know, in daytime, potentially nighttime if there's a fair amount of light, then this will work, definitely work better than you had before. And also at nighttime, as long as it is a bright area, the stuff that Brandon Lee did in Times Square looked fantastic, but that's Times Square. I filmed in Times Square before, many times, and I've had to use ND at nighttime. If you are expecting to have an amazing low light performance from this, then I'm afraid you won't get it. If you really want a 360 camera that's going to be fantastic in low lights, then, well, you're going to need to get yourself basically 6 to 8 Sony A7S IIIs and build a rig from that. Or just head down to Times Square.
I do wish they could have made it waterproof like the One X2 and their standard 360 module for the R and RS, because there's no way I will be using it in this sort of way like I did with the One X2. It's a bit ungainly, but clamping the 360 camera on a selfie stick to a tripod gives you such cool SnorriCam style shots. And whilst it is the most unadventurous way of mounting it, just having it away from you gives you the ability to film yourself without having to lug around another tripod and another camera. And that is invaluable to me. Hopefully this video has given you more insights into what is possible with 360 cameras now and how to get the best image from them. And yes, I do absolutely recommend using Topaz Video Enhance and Film Convert Nitrate. Hopefully it will also be useful for Insta360 to show them why certain things are important and also get them to sort out the audio recording urgently. Fingers crossed, with their next camera they won't treat the microphone as an afterthought and put in something that can truly complement the image. Look, I don't expect Zoom H3 VR quality, but if we could get closer to it, I would be very happy.
Ever since I first used an Insta360 camera to reframe, to have these creative shots, it's always been about what the possibilities with them could be if the quality was good enough, and it's never been good enough. For me, this is the first of their cameras that I feel I could comfortably use a shot, especially a car mounted shot, those sort of things, in my work and cut it in with the normal cameras and not be really jarring. But yeah, it's still not quite there yet, but it's a lot better than we've had before. All the other ones have been a bit, you know, people will say they're a bit gimmicky. It's really just been let down by the image quality. There's nothing else in this form factor that comes close to this image, nothing at all. So is it worth the money? God, the flames kill me. They kill me.